Hey everyone, it's Kim Velez here, and I am so excited that we have Shelly Bullard. Did I say that right? I didn't even ask
Yes,
you how to say your last
I
name.
know. No one knows how to say it. You said it exactly right.
Perfect. She is with us, so say hi, Shelly.
Hi. Hey, everyone. Nice to be here with you.
And we just did a part 1 on her channel, so definitely go over to her channel. I'm going to put the link in the description box below, and we talked about the importance of your concept of self, especially when you're manifesting your SP, and just how it makes things so much easier and sweeter for you. So you definitely want to check that out. And in this video, we're going to talk about how do you recreate your specific person when they're back in your life? Because this is the tricky part, in my opinion, or the trickier part, I should say, than just manifesting them back. So I guess, do you want to start, Shelly, with like, what's your experience or your opinion about what's the best way to kind of recreate these SPs when they're coming back in our life?
Right. Yeah. So first of all, recreating a specific person. Usually when people are talking about this, they're talking about like, how do I create a reality where my specific person is being the version that I like,
Yes,
that
yes.
I want,
The favorable
that
one.
I love. Exactly. And yeah, there's a lot of components to this, actually. There's definitely a lot of components to this. So the first and most important component to it, and this is sometimes it's not like necessarily what we would think about, but to me, the first component to recreating the version of your specific person that you want is self-concept. So like Kim said, we just did that video on self-concept. If you haven't watched it, you can go watch it. But the reason your self-concept, and there's more to it, I'm going to talk about more than self-concept, but the reason self-concept is important in creating the version of your specific person that you want is because so much of them treating you how you want to be treated has to do with what you're expecting to be treated as and what you're anticipating. So, for example, let's give an example so this makes sense. There is a self-concept that expects someone to leave us, right? And so we may look at that and think that's about the specific person, but when you really look into it, the self-concept is an expectation to be left. I expect to be abandoned. I expect someone to go away. I expect someone to distance. You as a person, your self-concept feels a particular way when you're holding the expectation of being left. And so this is why it always is going to come back to self. Self is always going to be the primary component for manifesting. We have to develop, first and foremost, a self-concept that really has expectations to be treated the way you want to be treated in relationship. So these, of course, are things like, I expect my person, and we don't even have to put it onto the specific person quite yet. I expect my person to commit to me. I expect my person to be totally in love with me. I expect, and you're developing new expectations of what you're going to receive in relationship, but it really does have to do with you, like who you think you are and what you think you're going to receive, regardless of who you're receiving it from. That's
Agreed.
my foundation. So what do you think?
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly, because it's one thing to focus all on them. And this is, I think you and I share that same kind of sentiment, I guess, about the importance of bringing it back to us before them. Like, we have to change the concept of them. We have to have different expectations about them and see them differently as well. But if we don't see ourselves differently, then I know personally from my own experience, I would just keep faltering back into that old concept of self constantly. And so then I would get the same results, because if I felt not good enough, then yes, I'm sitting here thinking and assuming and creating that he doesn't, and I could say a million times he wants me, but then deep inside about me, I'm like, well, no, he doesn't want me. Or if I didn't get a text right away or whatever, a week went by, I was in this whole story. I felt awful.
Mhm.
And you have to work on that self-concept. So definitely check out the first video because we dive in
Mhm.
deep about that, because
Mhm.
it builds up your confidence, and you switch into a different internal state of who you are. And the more you practice that, you actually believe that, and it just becomes you naturally. So
Yes.
you are less likely to do that. And then your thoughts are going to, when you're recreating your specific person, because you have to recreate them, because when they come in, all your old stories about who they are going to be triggered. And as you're recreating them and some of that is happening, you are standing firm in your self-worth and self-value with that beautiful story you've created. So it kind of counteracts. You don't stay long in the insecurity at all with them. It's just a
Right.
game changer.
Yeah, definitely. I so agree with that. And yeah, and then once you've developed that self concept, you can start to, but you have to have that pretty, like that should be a primary thing so that it's somewhat anchored, or you know how to get back into that knowing of who you are. I am a person who is committed to, I am a person who's deeply loved, I am a person who is claimed. All of these things become familiar to your whole being, right? You think the thoughts and you feel the truth of it. And then you can start to focus a little bit on the version of them that you desire. So one thing I want to say about this is I think there's a really easy way, and it's somewhat untapped, of creating your specific person to be the version you want. And this is so simple. And I have done a video on it, but it's so simple. We almost don't think about it, but it's using your memories of, if you've been in a relationship with your specific person before, it's using your memories of who they were and who you were when things were going the way it felt good. So most of us, of course, with a specific person, we have memories of when it was amazing. Most people wouldn't want a specific person unless they had those memories, right? There was a particular way that the relationship felt really, really good. Usually this is at the very beginning of the relationship before all our insecurities come up and like wreak havoc on the whole thing, right? So can you use your memories? This is just one technique, using your memories to remember, who is that version of them? How were they treating me? What types of things were they saying to me? What did they feel like? And also, who was I? What did I feel like? What was I acting as? What version of myself was I being? And what you want to do is both activate that version of yourself. You were probably confident. You probably knew they liked you and adored you. You probably felt pursued. All the things that you want to feel, you felt those things at a certain time. So through your memory, reactivate the felt experience of that, and also remember them. Oh yeah, that's the version of them. That's what they felt like. That's who they are. That's the truth of who they are. And that's going to help form and shape the version of them that starts showing up.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think I do that a lot with him. So I try to remember all the amazing times that we had together. And I think the other piece to this is in my own personal journey, what's really benefited me the most, in conjunction with keeping beautiful memories in my mind and also creating new memories that are, favorable and living in the end, so to speak, but is your mental diet. Because this is what so many people do, is that they'll do these beautiful visualizations and then all day long they have nothing but opposing thoughts. And so then what are you really creating? Because if all day long you're feeling not good and you're assuming, you're not recreating them, when all day long you're thinking the worst scenario for you or the worst about them. So I think it's a double whammy, because the thoughts are going to creep up, and it's about, if our consciousness creates our reality and you're dominant, your thoughts create. So what you tend to focus on the most is what we manifest naturally. We're natural manifestors all day long. So you just have to shift your thoughts on, I do it about myself, like we were talking about, I'll shift and really make it about me and remember who I am in that moment, to override that and put me back in the reality and the feeling of, no, I am, hell yeah, I got this, And then I also focus on, I have like 4 or 5 affirmations about him that I focus on recreating him. And it feels good when I think of it, because that is who he is. So I see him that way. And I just regurgitate that until I feel more settled. And then boom, you're done and over with it, you know, instead of going back with those thoughts that are not favorable for what you want.
Right. And I think you're touching on something that is so important to speak to. And it might be a missing piece for people, and they don't really understand, like, if manifesting isn't working or if the techniques aren't working. I think what's often happening is you're not fully in tune with really what's going on inside of you. And there's more of a mixture of beliefs and thoughts rather than a very clear living in the end experience of what you want. And the clearer that internal dialogue, belief, visualization, feelings, the clearer and more dominant that becomes, which kind of means the more you believe it, the more you know that is the ultimate truth, the more you're going to receive a reflection out there that is a match to that. And I do think that people waver between a lot of different types of thoughts more than they even know, you know, because we can do the like the scheduled or, you know, the formal visualization or the formal affirmations. But then if our mind is wandering through the day with going into expectations of being left or where are they or panic, then we have a mixture going on inside of us. And so that's okay. That's normal. This is all about retraining your inner world, retraining yourself back into the new belief system. And that all comes from, you know, practice and repetition. And for me, the way I teach it also is taking it deeper, like taking your practices deeper so that you're not just telling yourself an affirmation, he loves me, he loves me, he loves me, but no feeling tone there.
Oh,
you're saying he loves me, and you're literally feeling the truth of it as much as you can. So yeah, this is just an important thing to touch on.
Yeah, and I agree, because I tell my clients it isn't like you're reading a grocery list, and it isn't robotic, because if people understand how we naturally manifest, so like, and we were talking about this before we even started recording, but like, I mean, when we manifested the breakups and all the things, like, we didn't go sit and visualize and feel it, right? What we were doing is we kept obsessively thinking and feeling and believing and sensing in us that this is not working. They don't want me anymore, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so we were in that state. And so we manifested that. We were focusing on that, and we felt it to be true, and we assumed it. So then you want to kind of reverse engineer that and shift into when you're saying your affirmations. I tell people all the time, like, you have to say them slow enough and connect to them, so you have some imagery naturally pop up. Like when I do my affirmations of him, I see him and I feel him and I'm connected to him when I'm saying these things. Now, sometimes if my mind is going 100 miles a minute, I will just spit out the affirmations like out loud, like just to shut that part of my brain off and get me back. And then I'll do like a technique like visualization, or I move into my concept of self to get me in better energy. And then I can go reaffirm, recreating him, because sometimes you have to do that because the mind is going 100 miles a minute.
That honestly is such good advice.
Thank you.
Such good advice, and I'm actually going to even repeat it because I think it's that important. It's like when you are freaking out, at that point, maybe all you can do is just slam out those affirmations.
Listen,
you just
this is what I
throw them
do.
out there.
Yes, I'm like this. I'm like, he loves me, he chooses me, he chooses me, he chooses me. And I say it like 50 times if I have to. And then I'm like, okay, now the thought's gone. I felt good. I'm like, I fucking won.
Yeah, you can do that. You can throw it out there, and you may get like a hint of that new reality. What we're trying to do, any sort of technique, we're trying to change our state.
Yeah.
Right. And so we recognize when we're going down into the state of we are not loved. And so whatever you can do to like break the pattern. Actually, people talk about this, I'm sure, in psychology and stuff, like pattern breaking, whatever you can do to break up that pattern to try to get momentum in a new way is okay. And you said something else after it. You said you throw out the affirmations and then you focus on self-love. I don't think you used those words, but it sounded like you go into you,
Yeah.
how amazing you are, and then you focus on your specific person. That would totally be my sequence of what to do as well.
Yeah, because it feels,
break the pattern.
yeah, and it feels the best because it isn't, I think it's like, because when we talk about like Neville Goddard and stuff and all the inner conversations that we have, and I'm a very visual, I'm a Pisces, so I'm like super visual. My whole life I've daydreamed and I'm always up in, the clouds or whatever, but like I'm always visualizing whatever I'm thinking naturally. And it's like, I'll create arguments with him, because whatever we're thinking is going to create imagery. So I always tell people, if you're sitting here creating a scene in your mind that hasn't happened yet, that's not in your favor, that means all these thoughts were on autopilot that you were thinking that isn't you recreating them in a favorable way. So this is why you have to be aware of what is, like you were saying before, what's really going on inside of you, because so many people are like, oh, I'm doing the techniques and nothing. It's been 6 months and nothing. And it should not take 6 months. I mean, it really shouldn't. And it's because all day long you have way more opposing thoughts, which is keeping you in the state of, the reality where I'm not getting what I want. You're not recreating them. So they have to keep conforming to this version that isn't giving you what you want. And you're conforming yourself to a version that doesn't get what she wants either, So
yeah, for sure.
Really, and I think the beautiful thing is when you visualize and you're on top of your mental diet, like you're unstoppable with that. Like that's an intentional creator right there,
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think there's one other little tip I want to give around recreating a specific person as well that's important for people to understand. There can be some confusion about this, and it is, do I have to only be thinking of the end result of who I want them to be, or can I manifest in steps? And I always veer on the side of manifest in steps and so what I mean by this when it comes to recreating someone is, let's say you want to recreate a version of them that is in love with you. But when you are affirming and trying to visualize them being in love with you, it creates dissonance in you because you don't really believe it. So it kind of stresses you out. It's like you can't get behind the affirmation or the visualization. It kind of doesn't feel good because you don't believe it, you don't think it's possible, these types of things. Well, you can scale down to something that you can believe about them that is going to open you up. You're going to know you're kind of doing an affirmation or a visualization correctly when it actually really feels good. It's such an indicator of how much it's kind of penetrating into your whole self-concept, really, or your whole state. And so you can scale down from, they love me. Well, maybe I'm not there yet, but I can go into, they really care about me. I've been one of the most important people in this person's life. They loved me before, and so I know there's still love there. You kind of scale it into something. You got to feel, sometimes we got to like try on affirmations or try on visualizations and see which one really fits and feels good and resonates, and then start there. Start with they're thinking about me, or they're missing me, or they're wanting to see me, whatever it is that you can feel that like, I can get behind this. And it just feels like resonance, right? It's the difference between an affirmation that you believe and don't believe is really how it feels. An affirmation you believe, it's like, oh, I can get behind this. This resonates. This feels true. Versus, I don't really think this is true. So I'm curious what you think about that.
I agree with that. I do think that it is okay. Like, so I recreate in steps too. And well, not really. I kind of do both because I'm just like, well, I know I'm going to get here. So when that feels good, I'll visualize this end scene. Like I just do what feels good for me.
Right. Of course.
But I think I understand what you're saying, because there's a lot of people where they're like, oh, I couldn't even imagine being married to him, because we're not even talking for 6 months or something. So then I agree with you. Don't go there. Like create, they care about me. They want to be around me. They want to see.
Or they're calling me or something.
Yeah. And just start there. And then as you build that momentum and you see, because one of the self-concepts, I feel like I'm saying that backwards, that's really important to me personally, and I share this with the women I work with, is remembering the power within. Because you know, when you're constantly reacting to the 3D, when you're recreating, because this was my pattern, this is what would trip me up all the time. And this is the one that I'm breaking right now, is not reacting to the 3D. It's, you know, maybe a tiny bit, 1%, where, because I refuse to now, because I understand when you're recreating them, it's not going to unfold perfectly. And when people say, yeah, but you should manifest that, well, good luck. I mean, the way you look at it can be perfectly unfolding, but they're not robots. So it's not like, I want to experience all this at once, and they're going to come in and do it 100% exactly. You may get 85% of it, 70% of it, 10, whatever. But your job as the creator of your reality, understanding everything's created with what you focus on, and what you're connecting to, is to constantly reaffirm and connect to the reality that you want. And then they have to conform to that version. But most people give up. Most people are like, this isn't working. And they're not willing to do those steps. Or they're like, I've been doing this 3 weeks and nothing, or I got one text, and then they just go back to their old story and they're not recreating their person. They go back to their old story of their person. So you don't get what, because that's what I would do a million times, or I would start seeing movement with him. Like, cause everybody knows on my channel, I broke up with him like 3 or 4 times. I would get so much movement with him, but I had built up so much resistance. Like, it made me so, and so my path of least resistance was like, see ya, because I knew I could manifest him back in. And I decided I wanted to break that pattern, because that's not going to get me the long-term relationship. So having said that, when you're recreating them, you have to remember you're the operant power, which means you are creating the experience. So if you don't like it, you just keep in your mind, focusing and visualizing, you're affirming constantly what you want and connecting with your visualization of what you want, no matter what, until it conforms and shows up in your 3D. Like, you don't stop until it shows up.
Right. Yeah. It's like holding the vision of the truth, holding the vision. And this is honestly, this is where, for me, where we can even eventually let go of any techniques, right? Because back to kind of what we've been saying in both these videos, and really what I believe around manifesting is, when you get to the point of knowing who you are and what you are going to have, either with a specific person in any area of your life, no techniques are necessary anymore. Because when you hold the vision or the knowing of who you are and how you will be treated, and nothing really wavers you out of that, like, you don't, that's just the truth of who you are to yourself, then no techniques are needed, right? For the things that we know about ourselves,
Right.
For the way, like the self-concept that we truly hold, or the knowing about our relationship that we truly hold. If you're able to deeply and steadily hold that and know this is who you are, at that point, there is no technique that is needed, because you are landed in the truth, and like, really nothing can convince you otherwise. And so up until that point, and that's really that's mastery.
That's mastery, but
That's
most
mastery.
people aren't there. Like, they have to build to that. And that's with the recreating them, you'll get there, because the more you understand, I think too, that you are creating this. And so it's just simply like bringing it back to you. Who are you? Who are you? And that concept of self, and then thinking of them favorably always, because you think favorably of yourself. I think you build up in steps where you start releasing. I agree with you, like, because I have that with my own experience. Like, I just naturally think that way. But in the beginning, people don't. Like, you have to change the thought pattern, you know, because they don't naturally feel that way and they don't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's what manifesting techniques are. They're building you into a new belief system, or building you into a new self-concept. And it is as simple as practice. It really is. It is repetition and practice. You know, for me, the way I teach manifesting, I do prefer if my clients are practicing something that they can like really start to get on board with and believe, rather than like throwing techniques at themselves. Because again, like it's a deeper transformation that we're ultimately going for. But yeah, it is as simple as practice. And it's like kind of starting, you can start small, start where you can start, work your way into new beliefs, all while holding the larger vision. We can do both simultaneously. You can hold the larger vision of what this relationship is and that it's going to happen, and you can simultaneously work on tiny steps. And as you are doing all these practices, you are changing your inner knowing of the truth, and that is what's going to manifest the new reality. So,
and I think too, it's fun too, because it's like when you first are affirming and doing these visualizations, even when they feel good, like your thoughts create your emotions. Like I had a thing as a therapist where I would tell my clients, like, well, your feelings aren't valid because they're based off thoughts that are distorted. So we would walk through that process and understanding that when you change what you're focusing on, you will feel differently. So if you're focusing on affirmations about who you are and recreating this person that's favorable and lovely and like pleasing, then you start to naturally just feel better because that's what you're focusing on. So it's like, that's why I always tell people because it really is that simple, you know, like what we focus on, we feel. It's just intentional about it, because so many people just rattle off after like, I'm loved, I'm valued, and they're just not into it. And like, you're not shifting, you're not going to feel anything different, you know? So you have to be intentional, because when you visualize, you're very intentional, which is why visualization is powerful, because you're shutting everything off. You're creating a scene, you're feeling it from deep within, and you feel, like you were saying, that transformational shift. And I used to be like that 100%. That was my gig for a long time. And I still do it because I enjoy it. But then I understood the power of the affirmations and really understanding that when I repeat this, I am impressing upon my subconscious mind when I'm intentional about it. Because when I'm saying, he loves me, he calls me, he's amazing, he's the best boyfriend ever, like when I'm recreating him, that feels good. And the more you say it, like you really like, yeah, you know, like you feel it, because it's after a while, it becomes your truth, because you've repeated it so much. Because when we first meet them, if you had a nice experience in the beginning, you didn't have those negative thoughts about them. And then, so you, when you first started thinking it, you didn't really buy it either. You were kind of questioning when you started changing, when your insecurity showed up. So then you started thinking of them differently, but you weren't 100% sure until you manifested it. And then it was like, oh yeah, this is real. So you kept thinking that and assuming that. So I look at it, if we reverse engineer, it's the same thing. Where like, we may not believe the affirmations at first, but the more you say them and kind of step into it, like eventually you will, because it's repetitiveness. That's it. They're just thoughts that create our emotions. So think that's something that feels, that's what you want to experience, because the more you impress it and feel it, you'll be it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Yes. Yes to all that.
Yes. Sorry. I'm like, I can rant on this stuff and I really do. I think like the mental diet is so underrated a lot. And I think it's so important, because it doesn't work. It does not work good. It doesn't work well if you just visualize once or twice a day what you want, and then all day long you feel the complete opposite, and you're reaffirming the complete opposite. And like, people have to be intentional, and they have to put that effort in. And to me, that's self-love. Like, I love myself enough, I care enough about myself to take this time, discipline my mind to get what I want.
Right. Totally. I agree. Well, this is so fun. I'm so happy we did this.
I am too. All right, guys. So thank you so much, Shelly, for joining us. We truly appreciate you, girl. You have an amazing channel. If you guys don't know her, you probably do, but in case you don't, definitely check out her channel. Her video is in the link below, so you can go check out. She has amazing videos, and she knows what she's talking about. And we appreciate you all.
Thank you. Bye, guys.